Okay, so I'm going to cover the provisioning and deprovisioning portion of this webinar today. My goal is to cover the ways of provisioning users in the web portal today, as well as using the user management tool, or UMT, which is a method of provisioning users from Active Directory. And I'll connect to a server environment to show you that real quick. I'll touch lightly on the Client Hub, which is a new feature that is only available for premium and industry advantage customers. It's in beta right now, so if you use it, you can give us feedback. And then maybe a little bit on the API, depending on how long I talk for, which will allow you to have more control over how you're provisioning or deprovisioning users, and you can automate it as well. All right, so in the UI, ShareFile, as a quick overview, ShareFile has two types of users. We have employee users, which are your licensed users. And then we have clients or client contacts, which are your external third-party clients that you can have an unlimited number of. The employees are limited to your license counts, and you can create either of these types of users by clicking the Create Employee or Create Client Contact option in the top right. And as long as you give a first name, last name, and email address, you can create a bunch of these users at once and then apply the user permissions and create a bulk set of users that way. If you have a list of users maybe in another system and you have it in an Excel file, then you can use this method here to bulk import users from Excel. Two-step process. You download the template, and then you'll upload the template or upload the Excel sheet, and that will add a bunch of users that can be created at once. So here, let me do this, and I've downloaded this in the past, but let me show you what this looks like. You get an Excel file that is overall pretty straightforward. You just have first name. It's the same questions that we're asking for in the UI when we're creating users. So email address, first name, and last name are the only things that are required. But if I just create these two users as is, then when I upload this file, you'll see that it just adds these two users here. Again, pretty straightforward. And then the user access is the user permissions. So whatever settings you set here in the user access will apply to all of the users that you have here during the creation process. So if these two users, Bill and John, are supposed to be administrators, let's say that they're going to manage the users on the account. I'll give them all the people permissions, but I'm not going to give them like billing permissions because I don't need John or Bill to manage the billing on my ShareFile account. Something like that. But yeah, you can just tailor these to meet the needs of the users that you're provisioning. And then in a sense, you're creating a policy of permissions that you're going to apply to both of these users. Next is the storage location. Typically on a ShareFile account, there's just one storage location, but ShareFile does have a global presence. So if you do have a need to have storage in multiple geos or multiple countries, just let us know, let your customer success engineer or let the ShareFile support team know, and we can add multiple storage to this. There's no additional cost to have multiple storage locations. It's just a preference where not every company needs every type of storage or every storage location added, but if you do, just let us know and we can add that. And then next is assigning folders. So you can assign folders in this way, and it'll assign the folders to all of the users you have set in the import process. For this process, though, I'm going to select continue anyway. And then you get a welcome email that you're going to notify these users. And you can choose to skip this. So if you do want to send your own welcome email, like let's say you're doing an initial onboarding for your ShareFile account, you may not need to notify your users because you're going to integrate this with your single sign-on. You're going to integrate this with existing authentication. So you don't have to send this notification because you're going to send your own email notification, and they're just going to sign in with their standard single sign-on credentials. However, if you are going to use your ShareFile credentials for authentication, then you certainly can just send this email, which will look like this, and there will be an activate account button that will take the user through the password creation. If you have multi-factor enabled on the account, then they'll have to set up their two-factor authentication. So if they're using a authentication application, then they would connect through that. If they're using just the text message, then they have to verify their identity through that. But in any case, the users are created at this step, so you can choose to notify or skip, but it doesn't change the user's creation. I'm going to hit skip, and then I go into Browse Employees, and I can see those two users that are created. They've never logged in as of yet, but I'm going to go ahead and delete these users from the system. And that same process works with client contacts. So if you do want to create bulk clients, you can do the same thing where you add multiple, or you can do the same process, the same two-step process to create those users through Excel. So really just various ways of creating those users inside a ShareFile UI. But if the goal is to get users created, again, relatively straightforward on how to get those users into ShareFile. Now, if we want a more of a the accounts created, our users are created, but maybe our users are changing, and we want to connect that to our Active Directory, then ShareFile does have the user management tool, or UMT, that we can connect to auto create users. So within user management tool, similar to what I described when you're creating users, and like you set the permissions for a group of users on creation, you can do that in UMT as well. So if you're an administrator and you have the proper permissions under settings, admin settings, and policies, you can set different types of policies. So I can create a new policy and set the permissions, and then call this like junior admins, and then give them just a handful of permissions that I want them to be able to manage. And then when I create a group inside of user management tool, I can apply these permissions. So what that looks like is this. So let me open up UMT. I need to run this as an admin. And this has two sets of credentials. So first you have to authenticate to your ShareFile account, and then you authenticate to your Active Directory account. So for the ShareFile auth, we need to grab a app specific password. So you'll go into your personal settings, which is settings, personal settings, scroll down to manage multi-factor, and you'll have a application specific password that you can create specifically for user management tool. And I have that here. Let me authenticate. And then the next window will be authenticating to my domain. And this is a fresh install, so that I have nothing created at the moment. What you'll do when you first log in, you can see that you're connected to a specific ShareFile account, as well as connected to Active Directory. Again, those two authentications when you log in. So we'll go into the search field, and I have a group called ShareFile. I think I have two. Yeah, ShareFile and ShareFile admins. But if you don't know your group, you can just click search, and it'll pull up everything from Active Directory, and you could pull like your users or your domain users. But again, for this, I have a group specific for this. We have Tepe, we have Charlie Brinson, who's one of our product managers, and then myself. And I'm going to click Add Rule. Now, in User Management Tool, you can create a user rule, a group rule, or both. So meaning we'll create those users from Active Directory in ShareFile, or we'll create a distribution group in ShareFile from the Active Directory group, or both. I typically see both being done, so I'll show both here. It's just one additional step if you do both. So here's where you set those policy. So if I did make that junior admin role, you would see that here. I'm just going to give these users, we'll say, yeah, user administrator. You can set the default storage location again. So if you do have multiple storage locations, you can do that here. There's 2 checkboxes here at the bottom. This one is pretty important, I would say. So this first one for update ShareFile employee information based on the selected AD object. This essentially is if you disable the user in AD, it'll disable that user in ShareFile. So it doesn't delete the user, so it still consumes a license, but it does revoke their access. So if somebody leaves the organization and you need to disable that user's access, you disable them in Active Directory, and that'll in turn disable them in ShareFile. This other one is just creating the employees based off the group. So I'm just going to call it this as their company name. This isn't all that important. And again, you have that option to notify the employees if you choose to. Next is the group settings. So do I want to create the ShareFile distribution group? And do I want to update the group as people move in and out? So if I moved Charlie out of our ShareFile group, then Charlie would be removed from the ShareFile group on the ShareFile side. Hopefully that makes sense. So once you have a rule created, now you can go to the Rules tab, and you can see I have a user rule, which will be the 3 users, and then I have a group, which is still those same 3 users. And if I refresh User Management Tool, you can see the actions that will take place. So it's going to create Tepe and Charlie because neither one of them exist in ShareFile. It's going to update my information on my account, and then it's going to update the group. So it's going to make a ShareFile group and ensure that it has these 3 users in it. Now I can commit now, and that will be like a one-off run. It'll create the users, and that's it. But I can schedule this, and if I schedule this, I can set this to run continuously. I can set it to run every day, every week, whatever works for my organization. But all this does, and I'm just going to put some underscores in here because I think there's a couple of tasks already created. I'm going to create a new task here. I'm going to save it. And what this does is it just creates a task scheduler task in your task scheduler for user management tool. So if I go into task scheduler, this is the one that I just created. And you can edit this so that it runs all the time. So if I want this to run like when continuously, let's say, right? So it's not running every day or every week. I want it to run all the time, maybe every 5 minutes. I can go into the triggers, I can edit this, and I can set this to repeat the task every 5 minutes, and it'll run every 5 minutes. So if a user is removed from Active Directory role or disabled in Active Directory within a 5-minute window, it'll reflect on the ShareFile side. And just to show you how this works, if I click commit now, it's committing to ShareFile. Oh, I already have a distribution group to name this. So I did run this earlier. But yeah, you'll see the one error. And on the ShareFile side, if I go into my people section, you'll see that Charlie and Tepe are now created on the account. And like I said, if you disable these users in Active Directory, it will disable them on the ShareFile side. However, it does not delete the user. So to delete users in bulk, you can do what I did earlier. I mean, this is manual, so it's not really in bulk, but you click on Charlie Brinson, and I can do delete from the system, and then click delete. And now that user is gone, and the license is released back into the pool. But if I wanted to do this more on a schedule, let's say that I want to delete any user that has not logged in a 90-day window. So if I had multiple users here, I could filter this list by last login and see when they last logged in, and then target those users and then click on them and delete from system. But we can do this with the API. So this is maybe something that is in the weeds, or you have to have a deep understanding of ShareFile to leverage this idea. But basically, there are ways to manage the users with ShareFile's API, and anything that you see in the UI, for instance, like this last login is something that we can target for scripting. And I have a couple of scripts here that we're happy to share and talk through. So if this is something that is interesting to you or that you have a need for, again, just reach out to your customer success engineer, and we'll jump on a call. I'll likely join that call as well just to talk through it. But basically, it's just a way to target users for bulk deletion or bulk disabling based off a variable that we're selecting in the UI. So this one is just saying like if the user hasn't logged in a certain amount of time, then send a request to update that user ID to say is disabled equals true. Or we can do the inverse, not inverse, but we can do the next step, which would be if the user hasn't logged in, let's delete that user. So send the delete request to delete a particular user and purge them from the system. But yeah, like I said, there's many different ways of managing users through the PowerShell side or through that was the PowerShell SDK, but through the API method. So if that is something that you're interested in, just let us know either in the Q&A of this webinar now, or click the button down here and click contact your success engineer and reach out to your CSE to get connected. Those are the ways that I covered somewhat quickly on how to manage your employees. The newer feature is this client hub, which addresses managing your clients. And I'm going to try to keep this short, but basically you can create like a company of your clients, and then you can add them from your pool of users. So I don't think I have any users right now, but you can create clients directly from here. And this will create a client hub that you can then add all of the clients to from a particular company. So if I had multiple clients for this company, I could go into contacts and it'll suggest them in here. So it'll say like this user's email address is the same as another user. Let me add them to this client. And then this is just a better way of organizing clients' access. So if this was a company A and I had 15 clients from company A, I could add them all to the client hub here and then create a project that all of them have access to. So I could do like an onboarding template. And then this will make a project that I could then assign to all of those clients, and I can manage it from one location instead of having to like hunt and find all these users to add them to the clients. I can just make this centralized hub for all of the clients of a particular company. There's definitely more to talk on it, but I'm trying to keep my time relatively short. So with that, I will say that I'll kick it over to Tepe, who can talk more about managing your users and managing your account, maybe go into reporting and things of that nature. But thanks.
So diving into my section, we'll be covering auditing and security best practices within ShareFile. That'll include reviewing folder activity logs, security alerts, reporting, and security settings. So first thing I want to do is go into one of our folders here. So let's look at my favorites, and I've got this returns folder. And in here, if you go up to the top, you'll see more options. And let's go into view activity log. So from here, you can see that it just goes ahead and generates some recent activity on the ShareFile account. Now, if you wanted to filter it down, you can also select individual users and see what those users are doing on the folder, as well as check out activity on the folder for the past 3 months or so. And then make sure you also select that option for subfolders too. You can also filter on particular activity types. So for example, you wanted to see things like recent downloads, you can just filter it down to just downloads and such. And then finally, you have the option to export everything to an Excel file as well too. All right, next topic I want to talk about is employee activity. So with this, you can kind of see the folder activity, right? But now if we go into the employee section, you can also just see uh, employee activity as well too. So for in here, I've clicked into my account, and in the top you'll see activity and security alerts. So right here, if you click that, you'll see this recent activity where I logged into my ShareFile account from Sydney, Australia. So this is kind of where you can kind of see some recent unusual behaviors. We can also go into back to the basic information, and on the right hand side you'll see view folders and activity log over here. If you click that, it'll kind of generate that whole activity log view we had with the folder. Same way in here, you can filter it down to particular activity types and then narrow it down to particular dates. We can also generate that folder access report. So if you wanted to see the full view of what that particular person has access to on the ShareFile account, you can click on that. And then you can also click on access users content and then look in their personal folders, their file box, any recent sent messages like encrypted emails and such. And then finally, even things like recently deleted files as well. All right. So next, we'll go into reporting. So in the admin settings, you'll go up here into account and reporting. And if you click on reporting in here, you'll see that we have a few reports that's already been generated. We have recent reports and recurring reports. And if you click on create report here on the right hand side, you'll see the different options that we have. Now, just to cover a few, one of the most common ones that we have is a usage report, which is just your basic activity log on the ShareFile account. Then we also have a access report, so folder permissions. If you need to run a folder permission check on the ShareFile account, that's what you can run. Access change shows you the timeline for those folder permissions. So if you wanted to see recent folder permission changes, then you'll be running the access change. Storage detail gives you an overview of what files and folders are on the ShareFile account, as in what files are on, like exist on the account, while storage summary is more of how much data is being consumed on the ShareFile account. And then finally, we also have share and request reports. So those are for download links or upload request links so that are generated on the ShareFile account. You can run these to see who's creating those links. Then finally, we also have a users report, which gives you a breakdown of who exists on the ShareFile account as users, employees, clients, and then things like their last login times as well as too. So let's just go ahead and click into usage report in here. And then you can see that we have different options for um, range, time ranges. So for example, the longest we can do is 30-day increments. We can do the entire account, and we can do recurring, as well as choosing what format we want to save it in, whether it's Excel or a CSV file. When you hit next, it's going to take you into the recurring settings. So we could choose to do it daily, weekly, or monthly. I did the last 30-day increment, so I'm just going to do a monthly report running on the first day. And then I'm going to choose to save this in the returns folder in ShareFile. So the good thing about it saving back into a ShareFile folder too is that you can set up activity alerts on that folder, like upload or download notifications to get notifications of those reports being run. Okay, next item here is the notification history. So we do have a notification alert, notification report, but this one is a little different. So if you wanted to see a email that was sent out through ShareFile, you can go through the notification history tool here, pick a particular date, like today, for example, and see what email was sent out. And then if you click on the little icon here on the right hand side, then you can actually see what was sent out to that particular user. Next item we're going to talk about is under security. Now, first one, data loss prevention. So that is a integration with our on-prem storage solution. I'm not going to go into too much depth about this, but basically you have to have your own DLP solution and be running ShareFile as a on-prem solution to use these DLP settings. Okay, sign-in policy. So password requirements, we have it set here as the default 8 characters, one requiring one number and one special character. Now, my personal recommendation is that 8 is too short. I would at least increase that up to 12 characters, and then obviously require numbers, special characters, um, and then yeah, and then also multi-factor authentication. We strongly recommend that you require both of these on both the employees and the client users, even if you are using single sign-on for authentication. We strongly recommend that employees are turned on and clients are turned on. Now, these settings kind of look different this time. We've made a few updates here where you can choose what kind of MFA options are available to your clients and employees. And then here we also have the option for social sign-in. Now, right now we have it set so it's only available with Google, but we should be working on Microsoft and Apple here soon. And then finally at the bottom, we also have the option for single sign-on with, and these settings are available in here as well too. All right, next item is security policy. So auto remediation, we have 3 scenarios in here for impossible travel, high downloads, and accessing ShareFile from high numbers of IPs. So we're just tracking that kind of unusual activity and taking precautionary measures like resetting passwords and such in the case of like um, a malicious actor. And you do have the option to disable these if needed. Account lockout configuration, pretty self-explanatory. How many login attempts a user has before they're logged out of ShareFile and how long they're logged out of ShareFile. Terms and conditions, IP restrictions, that is enabled on our end by either support or the ShareFile CSEs. Just reach out to us and we can work with you on that. This authentication setting here. Now, the first setting is for web browser sessions. So web browser sessions, how long a user could stay logged in to an account while inactive. And then the second one is for things like mobile applications, desktop applications, things like that. And if they'll be asked to re-authenticate into the ShareFile account. Now, our recommendation is to have this set to something other than just never. So whether it be just 1 hour or 90 days, just some kind of setting in here, we strongly recommend that. The security alert settings. Now, this is again kind of tying into that auto remediation subject I was talking about just a few minutes ago. These settings are only visible to master admins on the ShareFile account. And basically, it's a setting to tell you who receives the notifications for these security alerts. So by default, it should be admins and employees, clients are receiving notifications for any of those kind of unusual activity. And then finally at the bottom, we also have the option to add like additional users or distributions groups to be notified of those unusual activities. All right. And then configure device security. I'm just going to go briefly into this. but this is for our mobile application and whether you want to set some kind of security policy on the ShareFile mobile application. The super user group. The super user group is a group of users that have access to all files and folder on the ShareFile account. So here we try to ask you to minimize it to just people who might need to just audit the ShareFile account. So key point here, if you want to audit the ShareFile report, ShareFile account, you need to have the reporting admin permission and you need to be listed under the super user group. And then in the quarantine files, this is malicious files, right? So viruses and such, if ShareFile finds that there are some malicious files, it's going to quarantine them in the quarantine section here. All right. Now, another security settings, AI settings. These are mostly going to be only available to our premium customers, but there are things like the secure share recommender that's available to both advanced and higher customer tiers. Um, if you want to disable that, you can through the AI settings here too. I don't know if Matt covered this, but in the Client Hub section, um, we do also have the option to enable the beta Client Hub feature here. And then if you want, you can turn it on as a trial mode so that only a select number of users can access Client through Hub. Uh, yeah. And then finally, in email settings, there's one setting in here that I do want to talk about, and it's the SMTP server settings. So if you want to make sure that your ShareFile emails, ShareFile notifications are coming through a legitimate corporate email address other than like a sharefile.com email address, you can use our SMTP configurations here to make sure they look like legitimate email communication. And then finally, here in the file settings, now this is where you can set up the policies for links being created inside your ShareFile account. Our recommendation is to disable the anyone options here at the top so that login is always required for any kind of downloads from the ShareFile account. And then on the request settings, it's not as much of a security concern. So I typically recommend that just disable this top option and just only require name and email address for uploads into the ShareFile account. Other things to note with the settings is that we also have the option to set default permissions. So for example, if you're using the ShareFile for Outlook application, you can set it to email recipient and then also set it so that those settings cannot be changed. It's also a good idea to set some kind of minimum expiration period on those download links, just so we don't have active download links that are never set to expire. That kind of wraps it up for my demo. Thank you, folks.